How you doing, everybody? It's Wardy here, and I'm pumped up to get into this one. Let's get the excitement down below in this Big Mets update segment, our second video on the day. Check out the previous one whenever you guys get a chance as we deep dive Brandon Sproat, Mets top pitching prospect, how great he's looking so far this spring, his expectations for 2025, and key remarks from himself, Carlos Mendoza, David Stearns, and Francisco Alvarez working with a new swing. Because now in our second video today, we have to get into the key reporting which has come out earlier stating that yes, the Mets are planning on meeting with Jose Iglesias in the coming days. I want to see the initial reactions down below, everybody, because it's quite the contrary from just last night, myself and Mets beat reporter Pat Ragazzo chopping it up in our live show, saying how it appears that Jose Iglesias with the Mets, his time has come to an end. And I've been under the firm belief from start to finish that until that man signs pen to paper with a different team, that the door is still open for him to return to this Mets club. So we'll get into where exactly this reporting comes from, how credible it is, and ultimately what role would Jose Iglesias have should he return to the Mets, along with another potential reunion, this time not an infielder, but let's talk about a reliever, not named Drew Smith. Yes, Brooks Raley, the southpaw, still rehabbing from reconstructive Tommy John surgery. Are the Mets back in that market? It appears that they may have, in fact, found themselves in that position. So let me see all the reactions down below. Thank you so much for smashing that like and subscribe on. I know a lot of you guys love Canalita and would love to see him back in Queens for 2025. I find myself in that category while also respecting the opinions of others who are perfectly fine without him for the upcoming season. I think the Mets will be fine either way, but there's no denying that Jose Iglesias would be a Swiss Army knife yet again for this Mets team. So let's get into where initially this reporting comes from. And I want to give a massive shout out to you, all my followers on X. If you guys don't follow me on X, make sure you guys do that, because without you guys, I would be nowhere. You guys tag me all the time in Mets news right away before I get to it, because say I'm busy being a dad or just living my daily day-to-day life. So thank you guys so much for tagging me in this news right away for me to cover as fast as I can. As we see, again, from our guy Johnny here, in case you guys don't know Johnny, he is one of the key voices for the Mets when looking at Spanish radio. So Johnny, who's been a follower of mine for a while, appreciate him greatly. He's been doing a great job on the call for the Mets for a number of years now, and he came out with a key post as of 4 hours ago at the time of recording this one. And as translated, it is the following. The Mets and the multi-position Jose Canalita Iglesias have a meeting planned this weekend or next Monday. The habanero, I love that, was an important complement in the classification of New York and them making the postseason. Love the wordplay, love everything there from Johnny. And again, I don't know exactly how smooth it was from the transition there from Spanish to English. Regardless, though, it is abundantly clear that at least according to our guy Johnny here, well, I'm going to go on a limb and say he has a level of sources. He's actively in the organization. He is literally a talking head for the Mets on radio, but as Spanish. So when I say talking head, I don't mean that as like what I'm doing. I mean radio call, obviously. So I appreciate this a lot from Johnny dropping the news here earlier today. And David Stearns came out with a key remark that I actually highlighted in our video from a couple hours ago that I'm going to do once more, as I think it's very notable about this situation in particular on where things stand with a guy like Jose Iglesias and why no one should be writing this off, until we finally see him land elsewhere. And Jose's numbers down below speak for themselves, but let's also see David Stearns speak for himself and state the following when talking about Luis Angel Acuna and the utility position in particular. Listen up and focus on all the way until the very end.
Him on the major league roster the way that it stands, with it just being like that smaller sort of bench utility type that's up for grabs?
Yeah, I think that's a discussion we're going to continue to have throughout camp, and it's a possibility. He's in that competition, he's part of that competition, but we've got a lot of time to make that decision. There's a lot of things that can happen between now and then before we have to make that decision.
A lot of things that can happen from now up until then, for us to have to make that decision. What does that tell me right there? It's the exact same David Stearns MO he gave us last spring training before we brought in JD Martinez. Remember how he was saying how Mark Vientos is going to be our DH? No duh, he's talking about the guys that are actively on the roster. He's not going to talk too much about guys that aren't actively on the roster, but he always leaves the door open, and very rarely will you ever hear David Stearns straight up say, no, we're completely done. He said, I think so, when asked, have the Mets pretty much rounded out their roster? But the fact that he said, I think so, is further telling that nothing is concrete and set in stone. So to hear Johnny come out with this key report, well, mind you, he's not a reporter at all. So for him to go out of his way to tweet this is telling of what he's been relayed and his confidence in that actually coming to fruition in the coming days. He did also tweet out something else earlier this offseason. I think I referenced news-wise, the Spanish, play-by-play guy there for the Mets doing a great radio call. But to reel back in here, David Stearns' remarks are telling me that knowing that we have plenty of time and a lot of decisions to be made, and a lot of things can change change and happen is where everything opens up the floodgates for a Jose Iglesias reunion. And while there was a lot of counter yesterday as to, okay, the Mets aren't going to bring back Jose Iglesias because, as David Stearns said it himself, the Mets want to have more flexibility in that position, right? They want to make sure that they put themselves in a spot that, by bringing in Jose Iglesias, that limits their opportunity and what they can kind of do with their roster construction. And if you bring in someone like him, that limits, obviously, your construction and what you're able to do. But it also makes things a whole lot more exciting to bring back a guy that was one of your true rally pieces, along with Francisco Lindor. I think you could rightfully say that Jose Iglesias was the most valuable player to the Mets last season, not name Mr. Smile. And what we saw Iglesias do this past season, right? In 85 games, just under 300 plate appearances, 4 home runs, 26 RBIs, a 337 average, a 381 on base percentage, a 448 slug, a higher WAR, which means he was a more valuable player and wins above replacement than our guy here in Pete Alonso, and a 137 WRC plus, which is pretty much 40% above the league average batter. So Jose Iglesias did electric things for the Mets, both offensively and defensively for them. We saw him flashing the leather as much as he did. And while David Stearns did make note, as I was getting back to a couple minute or two ago, on how what we want right now is flexibility, especially when we look at that infield and utility position, especially guys that say have options, because we know we're going to have to be calling up guys and sending guys down plenty. And also when looking at just the roster construction in general, it makes a lot more sense to have a guy that's flexible because of injuries and things inevitably happening that you can't control, versus having a guy who no longer has minor league options and is pretty much a slam dunk to get picked up elsewhere if he is not going to be staying here with the Mets, if the Mets decide to part with him or go down whatever route they may find themselves going down. And there are some other key notes as to why Jose Iglesias not coming back to the Mets does make a level of sense, not only to have more flexibility for the kids that we mentioned in Luis Angel Acuna and Ronnie Mauricio when he's healthy and really ramping up this spring, and Jet Williams to a degree, who will also be getting center field reps among other, and of course Brett Beatty, you can't forget him, even though I know a lot of you guys have at this point. I think it's also important to note the following, which comes from MLB Trade Rumors earlier today, which is as follows: the lack of flexibility is magnified when there's a player in the lineup who perhaps needs 2 to 4 days off, but probably not a full IL stint. It's also notable when a specific reliever or the relief corps as a whole is overworked and the team would have liked to have a fresh arm in the mix. There could very well be some uncomfortable DFAs on the horizon for the Mets, though injuries or poor spring performances obviously can make those decisions easier. And that's where the signing of Nick Madrigal that the Mets made, mind you, was a split contract signing of a former top prospect there who has had a noodle of a bat, but has been a really strong glove that we've seen in the infield for the Cubs over the past couple of years. And that's what the Mets will be getting. Superior defense, but not so much on the offense with Madrigal. But he's not even a slam dunk to be on this roster on a split contract. And all it takes is a Jose Iglesias to just best him between the two to be on this roster. Now, again, I understand by having Jose sign on a major league contract, it would mean that he would have to be on the roster pretty much the whole time. And you're going to have tough conversations if there ever would reach a point where, hey, you would have to DFA him to make roster room for something else. Maybe things aren't working with him, among other things. But for Jose Iglesias, who reportedly turned down the Mets' one-year contract offer just to still sign a one-year deal. That's reportedly what he wants, per Pat Regaz over the past week and a half or so. It's clear that he obviously wants a reunion to happen. He wants to rekindle this relationship with the Mets. He's not going to have the vibes anywhere else. And even in a limited role with the Mets, he is as selfless as they come. I look at Jose Iglesias, and I beat this drum plenty, I'll say it again, just like I look at Jesse Winker. Selfless players that want to be Mets, that'll do anything in their power to help this team win and help them win right now. Jose Iglesias was not only one of the most clutch hitters consistently for the Mets down the stretch in the second half of 2025, but he also was a lethal weapon with his glove at times at second base. Also, it doesn't hurt to have a backup shortstop either. The Mets currently don't have that right now. Their backup shortstops currently stand at Nick Madrigal and Luis Angel Acuna. Two guys that the Mets don't really plan or want to be in those positions. Madrigal, especially, who's had literally little to no reps that we've seen in said positions, in recent years at shortstop. He's had no reps there. So I think when you look at the fit here for Jose Iglesias, he is a perfect mentor and a true leader. Really, just like how JD Martinez signed late last year and put his arm over Vientos right away when they first met. That's exactly how I perceive Jose Iglesias to be in similarity with a guy like Luis Angel Acuna, with Ronnie Mauricio, even though I know he'd have to be looking up to him the same way I look up to literally everything as a short schmuck, or Jet Williams, where he'd actually have to look down a little bit, whatever it might be. Jose Iglesias is the exact kind of guy I want, not just for the vibes, which can definitely carry a team. JD Martinez is on record stating with Joel Sherman and John Heyman in a recent podcast over this past week that he talked to Carlos Mendoza and he was the heavy advocate behind the Iglesias call-up. JDM was asked by Mendy not long after the Mets' rough start of the year. And once JDM was with the club, because remember, he didn't start for the first month or so because he missed spring training, so he had to get ramped up. When he came to the Mets, he was asked by Mendy what they should do to try to get some things figured out. And he did mention calling up Jose Iglesias because of how much of an immediate impact he'll have in the clubhouse to help the players, to be this charismatic personality, a goofy one, but also be electric in his ability to get on base and to be grinding it out every single at bat. And that's what Jose Iglesias does better than most I've seen in recent history at the second base position for the Mets, other than prime Jeff McNeil when we look at the batting champ from 2022. And Jeff, knowing there's a lot of uncertainty with him this season as to how much playing time he's going to get, is he a slam dunk to be in second base because could Luis Angel Acuna overpower him with a great spring training potentially, or is it going to be McNeil or bust? Well, if you bring in a guy like Jose Iglesias, that makes it a lot easier and a lot more flexibility here. It's a good problem to have. You have an abundance of riches of up the middle infield pieces for second base especially. You got literally 2, 3, 4, 5 that you can choose from. It just varies in experience and what you're getting from them. But the Mets will have quality depth, and they would be adding a piece that was such a rally, was such a focal point of their run in 2024. The OMG Mets, that JD Martinez said it himself that he's the reason why that started, because he played the OMG song as a semi-joke when Iglesias first got called up, and then bam, we all loved it, and the rest is history. I think that this is a foregone conclusion, just like the Pete Alonso sweepstakes, so I'll say it once more. If Jose Iglesias is not in New York Met by time the regular season begins, I will still be surprised. Because when you look at the competition, just like we broke down a video a couple days ago on how the Mets can bring back not only Jose Iglesias, but Mark Canha as well, that they throw a non-guaranteed contract offer at. The reason why they can make it happen is when you look at the roster right now, Nick Madrigal don't got to be here unless he's absolutely fantastic in camp. And even then, spring training performance only means so much. You know, Zach Short was good in spring training last year, and look what that happened. Nick Madrigal, Zach Short, they fall in the same category for me. Former Chicago Cubs infield teammates, former, Zach Short, a former Met now. Nick Madrigal may start the year for the Mets, and I think he'll find himself in similar fate, where if he starts the year for the Mets, I don't think he's going to be there too long because the bat just will not be enough for them, and a defensive replacement is not enough, in my opinion, to hold a roster spot, which is why when you look at Jose Azocar, that the Mets have as an outfield piece that they have depth-wise, they can DFA him as well. He's just a speed demon. That's pretty much it. And they also have guys like Jared Young that they signed there earlier this offseason, who is pretty much, a utility guy that split time in the KBO and the AAA for the St. Louis Cardinals this past year, has power, but is more of a backup first baseman than anything else, and it makes even less sense to bring him in if you do in fact bring in Mark Canha. So I'm going to stick with the belief that Jose Iglesias, I expect him to return. I think they're going to have a great conversation hopefully this weekend or Monday, whenever it's going to be, and we'll further report once we find out more information. Let me know, guys, your thoughts about Jose Iglesias in the comments down below. Mark Canha, I think that there's still an absolutely route where that can happen, because why wouldn't you want Mark Canha back on a non-guaranteed contract? I mean, every single day of the week, you're taking that. You're the Mets, in my opinion. So to go from Jose Iglesias now, folks, let's talk briefly about another potential reunion, this time having everything to do with Brooks Raley. Yeah, I love Brooks Raley. I really do. Brooks Raley's so much fun. He, like Aaron Loop, a true formidable southpaw option for this Mets team that we saw over the past couple of years, and he blossomed greatly for this Mets team that we saw in 2023. One of the better trades that we saw under the Billy Epler regime, the Mets traded Keyshawn Askew, who's a really, really interesting arm, all wacky. I think the Rays could make him great. But Brooks Raley has been awesome for the Mets, and sadly, he went down last season after just 8 games, 7 innings. Didn't even give up a run yet, mind you. Had a 1.88 FIP as well as 0.7 WHIP. Ridiculous numbers. Love the K to walk ratio there. He went down with reconstructive Tommy John surgery, but like how the Mets just brought back Drew Smith on a 1-year, $1 million contract with a second-year team option, is the way that I fully expect them to go about Brooks Raley here. Because one, Raley had surgery shortly in the season, so he will be able to impact the team sometime, hopefully in the second half of the year, right? And that's where Raley could really come back in this Mets bullpen and be a true lefty option, not named AJ Minter. He's a huge upgrade over Danny Young. He's a huge upgrade over Genesis Cabrera right now, on paper at least. Anthony Ghost, who's an outfielder turned, flame-throwing southpaw reliever that was submitting today for the Mets at Port St. Lucie. So Brooks Raley, again, I love the combo. I love everything that he did for the Mets. He was nails for us in 2023. Bring him back so he can continue to rehab in the organization like Drew Smith. Then once he's back to be in this Mets bullpen, hopefully at some point before the end of the season, you do that, and just like that, your bullpen just got better. Brooks Raley can be utilized on low leverage, high leverage, and the best part about him is that if you bring him him back once he does eventually return is that you could really utilize him as a true lefty specialist and allow AJ Minter to be more focused as that true setup man for Edwin Diaz, regardless on if he's facing lefty or righty batters, right? Because AJ Minter is a really good high leverage reliever to begin with, one of the most dependable high leverage arms that are lefties in the game today. Brooks Raley, though, isn't far behind in just how impactful he would be for the Mets right away. It's not going to be as big on the punchies as much as maybe you're going to see a guy like AJ Minter at times, but he's going to get those outs and he's going to do it at a tremendous and truly a quality rate. So Mets fans, let me know your thoughts on a Brooks Raley reunion here, because the entire reason as to why we're even talking about him today is because of reporting that came out over the past day or so. And I will preface that, the reason why I have on the title a Raley reunion question mark is because I don't know how much I should believe this. And this comes from Cardinals Live. For those that don't know Cardinals Live, I referenced him earlier this offseason. He's pretty much an anonymous, reporting account in which he does his absolute best every day to relay the information he hears. He's been right about things, and he's been wrong about things. There's been a lot of controversy going on with him because of what he got right and what he got wrong about Arenado and Bregman, because he's a Cardinals fan, so he's been heavily involved from the St. Louis Cardinals point of view with things, as well as talking about the Red Sox point of view. So thankfully, we don't have to worry about that, but we have to focus on him stating the following: Mets and veteran relief pitcher Brooks Raley close to a deal. Now, he isn't the type to just throw this out there for the sake of throwing that out there, I feel like. So we'll see in the coming days, should the Mets actually ink a deal with Brooks Raley. If so, it'll be just like that, a one-year deal with a second-year team option more than likely, so that way the Mets can bring back Raley and have him for a full-fledged season. But in the meantime, if you bring in Raley, I think this would be tremendous to bring him back for at least another year, see what he can do once he's fully healthy, because he's electric. And we'll see if he's right in the end, that being in Cardinals Live, on them closing in on a deal. You guys can let me know how you feel about the potential reunion of Raley. Are you believing at all what Cardinals Live is throwing out here? We've referenced him in the past, in which he actually was accurate about what we referenced in the past on the reporting at the time a couple months ago. That was separate from Raley. I think it was more on the Alonso sweepstakes and other things at that very moment. But guys, let me know in the comments down below your thoughts, and honestly, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much would you take this with a grain of salt or not in the case of this report on Raley? Thank you guys again. I'm going to take it with, I'm probably in my confidence level with Brooks Raley returning the Mets right now. I think I'm at a 35%. I just need to find people more credibility, more reliability to really reaffirm. But again, this feels like the kind of thing that just makes too much sense to happen. So with that being said, folks, that's going to wrap up our show. Thank you all so much for watching. Let us know your continued thoughts in the comments down below. Are you for or against Candelito returning Mr. Jose Iglesias and Brooks Raley, one or the other? Neither. Let me hear it down below. Thank you again. And as always, no matter what, let's go Mets. Peace out.